Throughout my career as a writer, I've heard people be really concerned with originality for very different reasons. When I was doing my MA, people really wanted to be original because they didn't want to seem passé or reductive. Nowadays, I see people being really concerned with originality because they want their book to have a really good hook. And this is actually really important. If you want to be published, if you want people to buy your book, you need to have a hook. What is going to make it stand out from the dozens, hundreds of other books just like it in the exact same genre with very similar tropes and plot points? But how do you come up with original ideas? The phrase "there's nothing new under the sun" can be really daunting for someone who does want to create original ideas. And I used to be quite concerned with this myself, but I've implemented a few things, some more consciously than others, that I think have helped me having fairly original ideas. And I do say original loosely because I do believe that there's nothing new under the sun, but original enough that I can really make them my own, can create hooks, and can get readers and publishers interested in what I have to say. So today I've got 6 tips that I'm going to go through with you to help you be more original in your writing or to have original ideas. If you don't know who I am, my name's Sam. I'm a romance author and I live in the UK. I've got 2 books out, The Summer House in Santorini and its sequel, The Summer Wedding in Santorini, and I'm working on my 3rd, which on the channel here I've nicknamed Project Gilbert. But enough about me, let's talk about your original ideas and how you're gonna get them. My first tip is to read. And I don't just mean read more, but to read more varied stories. A lot of times romance authors might only read romances, or thriller authors might only read thrillers, and you can get stuck in this kind of echo chamber of the same ideas bouncing around. By reading outside of the genre that you write, and by reading really widely, it allows you to be open to more ideas and to see how those ideas play out in other formats. For example, for Project Gilbert, I've been very heavily inspired by a lot of memoirs that I've read, which is not the genre that I'm writing. It's about the ideas as a whole and drawing parallels between things that you see in other genres and in the stories that you're reading and the things that you are creating. And you don't have to do this with everything that you read. I don't think you should go into reading looking to mine ideas from those stories, but it will happen naturally the more you read and the more widely read you are. The next tip is going to sound a little bit cheesy. Pay attention to the things in your life. It's Anne Lamott who says there's ecstasy in paying attention. She actually talks a lot about this concept, and I did a full review of her book Bird by Bird here on the channel, so I'll leave a link to that in the description. But when you start to pay attention to the small details, you'll find that it really inspires you creatively. I talked about this a little bit when I went away to Greece and then to Spain with my husband, and how every time I travel, I always end up with like a fully formed book idea by the end of the trip. And it's because when you're traveling, you're having to pay attention to things that in your day-to-day life just kind of pass you by, like street signs and text on menus and things like that you might normally just kind of glaze over. You have to linger on a little bit more because it's all foreign to you. Even if it's in the same language that you speak, the context is all foreign. So it forces you to pay attention. And in that paying attention, you're almost romanticizing those details, whether voluntarily or not, which then creates that creative inspiration and that spark of idea. And you don't have to go abroad to do this. You can practice this in your day-to-day life. I find on my dog walks, for example, those are really inspiring times for me. And it's just about learning and training yourself to tap into that energy as you move through life. My next tip is to think about combining ideas that you have. In the past, I've had ideas that I've then tried to flesh out into something, and I've just found that they kind of fall flat a little bit. And now almost by default, I wait until I have multiple ideas that I then try to put together, even if those ideas don't feel like they go together. I saw a TikTok the other day that was someone saying, take your favorite classic novel and your favorite current TV show and come up with an idea that combines those. So Pride and Prejudice meets Sex Education, or Tess of the D'Urbervilles meets The Last of Us. But the point isn't that you're trying to necessarily create like a genre-bent retelling. It's more just training yourself to combine ideas that you have. Because like I said, sometimes those singular ideas can be really heavily inspired by something you've read or something you've experienced or something you've heard. And so by combining ideas and exploring the tension between those and the intersections between those, that's where you can start to really find an original experience. elements. And that's also where you start to create that hook. Tip number 4, figure out what your writing style is and let that dictate some of your ideas, or at least create a lens through which you interpret ideas that you have. I'll give you a really personal example for this one. I have always loved writing sort of larger scale stories with lots of characters, worldwide stakes, that kind of thing. My MA dissertation was a young adult near future science fiction based on climate change. So very different to what I write now. Editing Sam here. I did a really bad job of explaining this, so I'm going to give it a go in a more concise way. My writing style is very immersive and descriptive, and I find that it's really difficult for me to write the kinds of narratives that I see in the market about those kinds of wide scope narratives. So when I'm exploring ideas like that, or something that has a large scope, I try to explore that idea through the lens of what works best for my writing style. So what is the angle on that story that's going to allow me to get really close in and immersed into one element or character or situation so that I can work within my writing style. And that's what I'm doing with Project Gilbert. Is that story has really wide scope and is a little bit ambitious for my writing style, but it's allowing me to get really original with it because I'm taking what would normally be quite an expansive story and I'm really drilling down on one person and one set of struggles and one perspective. Yeah, I think that's a much better job of explaining that. So I've learned to filter my ideas and process my ideas through the lens of my actual writing style. Because if I have an idea for something that is that wide scale, it's like, okay, well, maybe I do want to write about that, but how can I zoom in on that to find the thing that's going to lend itself to my creative expression? And it has to be original to you if it's based on your writing style. No one else is going to be able to take that idea and execute it in the exact same way as you. Tip number 5 is going to seem maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but it is to actually lean on tropes and story structures. Hear me out. Story structures like the hero's journey, or tropes like enemies to lovers or forced proximity, these don't exist as scripts. They exist as structures. Tropes and story structures are not pipes through which your story is going to flow like water. We're not trying to create that level of structure. It's a trellis on which something really organic and beautiful can grow. And your story is going to be able to reach new heights if you give it that structure to cling to. I find that when I force myself to adopt structure, it allows me to really refine the intention behind each moment. And like, okay, if this is my structure, what do I want to communicate with that? And that's where a lot of really original ideas come from, because you can look at tropes and you can look at the way things are normally done and you can say, yeah, but what if we did this? And that what if, that is where originality comes into play. So don't be afraid to lean on those tropes and those conventions and those story structures and those outlining methods. They're not there to shoehorn you into something that you don't want to be in, or shoehorn you into a story idea that's the same as everybody else's. That's not what that's there for. It's there to allow you to set and subvert expectations with the reader based on those conventions. And if you ask the what if within those structures, that can be really magical. It gives you all of these interesting tensions and questions and more what ifs to lean into, which just propels you further and further towards originality. Last tip, find someone that you can bounce ideas off of. It doesn't necessarily have to be another writer, and actually sometimes it's probably better if it's not another writer, because again, you don't want to create that echo chamber. If you are going to try to find another writer to bounce your ideas off of, maybe try to find someone that works in a different genre to you. Shout out to Caroline in my writing group. Caroline writes crime and I write romance, and every time I have a romance idea that I say to her, or every time we're having a conversation where we're like, we should turn that into a romance book, she's like, and then you could kill this person. And our slogan between the two of us is snog the boy, stab the villain, run off into the sunset. Caroline will always push me to think about my romance ideas in a sort of darker, more twisted kind of way. But also don't be afraid to just talk to like your mom, or talk to someone who doesn't read within the genre that you write. If I talk to my husband about romance ideas, like any question that he asks me is going to be something that I would not have intuitively thought of. Or it's definitely not the first question that I would have asked. So that becomes a really good opportunity for you to lean in and create more of those what ifs. So if you're looking for that originality, don't just find someone who you know is gonna validate the idea that you already have. Find someone who is maybe gonna push back or not fully understand what you're going for, or is going to throw their own ideas into the mix. That's how you're going to get to the right mix of ideas that creates that original spark and that hook. And that's it. Like I said, I do some of these more intuitively than others, but you can of course be really intentional about weaving any of these into your life and your creative practice. Whatever originality means to you and why ever it's important to you, whether it is that you just don't want to be reductive or if it's because you're looking for that perfect hook, I hope these tips have helped you. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like and don't forget to hit subscribe. I've got lots of reading and writing videos coming your way very soon. As always, thank you so much for watching and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.